All right, so Shama, something that I'm seeing that definitely plays to a lot of what I've been saying. From Joe Rogan to I just saw Matt Taibbi just drop something like this. I'm covering something that the actress Justine Bateman did on Twitter a little later. This rad lib cancel culture, identity politics, critical social justice, whatever you want to call it, it became so oppressive and so distasteful to so many people that the right wing has claimed the mantle of freedom of speech and personal liberty. And it is going to be very hard to get it back. I feel that any workers' party that is going to be successful with the working class is going to have to disavow all of that shit. Now, that does not mean you throw people under the bus, but in my opinion, that whole that whole way of approaching those issues was always intended to divide the working class. It was always intended to distract from a class-based analysis of social conflict. And we've seen it tear apart not-for-profit organizations with people screaming at each other for not being sufficiently correct in their speech or in their actions or in their history or in their social media. That shit, to me, must be a non-starter. You want to talk about that, you need to go somewhere else. You need to go somewhere else because it destroys every organization that gets infected by it, and it is going to make it impossible to attract working class people if that's part of your identity.
Yes. First of all, if you look at just even the theories, like, I mean, we could talk about this a lot, but just very briefly, if you look at the theory, so-called theory, I mean, completely reject it and I don't want to be respectful towards it, but the so-called theory of intersectionality, the way it's that whole whatever flow
Right.
chart, it's all these oppressions, different oppressions, and they put class next to it. That's one of the
Right.
oppression. That's
Right.
completely, that's turning reality completely upside down.
Right.
They refuse to, I mean, it's the whole idea of intersectionality and identity politics is in service of the ruling class. I mean, individual practitioners of those ideas could be innocent, and a whole generation, especially in cities like Seattle, has been has grown up on those ideas, and they're not all ill intentioned, but they have to be won over away from them, and we have
Right.
done that a
Right.
lot. But the idea itself is my point. The idea itself is in service of the ruling class, where it is trying to negate the realities under capitalism, which is it's the class structure
Right.
of the system that then leads to oppressions of various kinds, because that is necessary for the system of capitalism in order to carry out the horrors that it perpetrates on ordinary people. I mean, I mean, Keaton, you referred to this earlier, like, who are the biggest racists right now? The people who are allowing the genocide in Gaza to happen. Well, part of that is being engineered by telling liberals to that, I mean, or not telling them, but sort of sending the message to liberals of dehumanizing Palestinian people, like their
Right.
humanity is less
Right.
important than this or that wedge issue in the United States. And so that's the goal of these kinds of ideas. So these ideas fundamentally are deeply, deeply pernicious, and we have to reject them. We have to always ground ourselves in class analysis, meaning that class is the underpinning of capitalism. Class and the opposed, oppositional, uh, this whatever goals of the capitalist class versus the rest of us, that capitalism in that sense being a zero sum game, that is at the center of it, and that then leads to all kinds of misogyny, racism. And it's not that all of these oppressions started on with when capitalism came into being, but these oppressions came into being with class society as a whole. Class
Right.
society, in order to
Right.
protect, for example, personal wealth, the ideas of patrilineal societies,
Right.
subjugation of women, all of this came
Right.
about through the class
Right.
structure. And so
Right. To
we
guarantee your inheritance.
guarantee your inheritance, and that also meant you could subjugate a whole section of society, not just women, but men and women together, because they weren't the owners of the wealth and you wanted to keep them that way. So all of that is in the mix, and we have to absolutely reject it. I'll also say another point, which is that sort of it can be said in two ways, and it needs to be said in two ways. One is for the people who said that I'm voting for Harris despite this, the unspeakable killings happening in Gaza and Lebanon, because I care about LGBTQ rights. Well, you can't actually, in any genuine way, if you think about it and if you look at history, there is no basis for fighting against any kind of oppression if those same people who claim to be fighting against a type of oppression are then allowing another type of oppression to happen. If you're against oppression, you're against
Right.
oppression, period.
Right.
So
Right.
there is no basis for winning gay rights or black rights or any kind, while the same people are then allowing this horror to be to continue in Gaza. And one of the interviews we did in On Strike in our broadcast was with this black writer called Ijeoma Oluo, who said that, at the very least, perpetrating a genocide should cost you your job. She was refusing to support Kamala Harris, and I'm sure she came under a lot of pressure as a black public figure to do that, to support Harris, but she refused to. And one of the points she made was this: like, what prospects are there for us to actually fight for black people when, as black people, we have allowed this to happen? There is no
Right.
such
Right.
prospect. And
Right.
then one other thing I'll say is that if you look at the history of any kind of fight against oppression, whether it was Roe v. Wade or gay rights or anything like that, black rights, it always came through mass movements and rank and file labor. It came, gay rights
Right.
Yes.
came
Right.
through actions like Stonewall Rebellion. What did the Democrats do? The Democratic Party is the party of don't ask, don't tell, and Defense of Marriage Act. That's the Democratic Party. And it was always rank and file organizing that defeated these kinds of oppression. So, the thing I was trying to say is that we should reject this false dichotomy between fighting against one oppression versus fighting against another. As a matter of fact, if you don't fight against all, then we're going to see a downhill sort of race to the bottom for all of them.
Please clap.